Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Movie Nights movie review. I am Dalton Burdett, and I'm with the amazing Nick Iricchio. Nick, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you, buddy?
Good as always, and we are here to talk about Death of a Unicorn. This film is written and directed by Alex Scharfman, which I believe it is their feature directorial debut, and it is about a father-daughter duo, Elliot and Ridley, hit a unicorn with their car and bring it to the wilderness retreat of a mega-wealthy pharmaceutical CEO. The duo is played by Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega, and Nick and I were fortunate enough to be able to see an early screening of this film, and I am happy to say I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this film. It has some flaws, which we'll get into later, but I want to start off by talking about some of the positives. One, it is a satirical comedy horror film, and I think it succeeds in all three of those things. It succeeds in its satire, it succeeds in its comedy, and it succeeds in its horror. The unicorns are horrifying in the movie, and it sets up a very interesting dynamic of, you know, typical like unicorn lore versus like what the movie's trying to do, which like the movie didn't have to do, but it just did that for us. And obviously the satire on the wealthy and immortality and how they have access to things that they want to keep away from certain people. And I thought the satire of that and the social commentary worked really well. I thought that both Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega gave really excellent performances. I also want to shout out some of the other supporting cast. Richard E. Grant, Anthony Carrigan, Will Poulter, and Tia Leoni all were fantastic in the movie. Like, they all did so great. It's
This is a movie
unbelievable.
nights review. We're gonna shout out Richard E. Grant whenever we possibly can.
Absolutely, we are.
That's just a fact.
Absolutely. And I've always loved Will Poulter. I've loved him ever since he did We're the Millers in Detroit. And I was like, I had whiplash of like what a great actor he was. I've been following him ever since. And he gives a comedic performance in the movie, and it's fantastic. Where I think the movie fails a little bit is it establishes early on kind of this dynamic and story with the late mother of Jenna Ortega and the late wife of Paul Rudd. And while it does touch upon that relationship later on in a very poignant way, I wish there was a little bit more to go around with that relationship. It kind of left a little bit more to be desired there. And what they did was good. I was just wanting a little bit more out of it. And there are a couple of sequences in the film that also in theory were a good idea, but they looked cheesy and it took me out of it. I'm not going to spoil what it was, but Nick, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a sequence where it looks a certain type of way, and it took me out of the movie a little bit because of how it looked. It was important for the story and it worked for the story, but it looked kind of silly. And I also think that the second act of the movie has a couple of sequences that could have been paced a little bit better. Overall, I think the pacing is pretty good for the film, especially in the first and third act. But I think the second act did have a little bit of a pacing issue that could have been fixed a little bit. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed the film. I had a great time, and I hope other people do as well. Nicholas, give me your thoughts.
No, I enjoyed it as well. I think that as what you said, right, the horror comedy satire is a tightrope to walk, and I think the movie treads it very well. I think the unicorns, yes, were scary as fuck. I think there was some very wonky CGI a good portion of the time with them, but there's a few close ups and key shots. It was sort of one of those things of like when they needed it to look good, man, it looked great.
Yeah,
I'll akin it to like Red Hulk and Captain America. You get those close ups, you're like, oh, yes. And then you get the wide shot and you're like, and we're in a PlayStation game. I think Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega, I think are great actors. Paul Rudd's always gonna be likable to me. To me though, I think the real standouts of the movie personally were Will Poulter and Tia Leoni. To me, they felt like the two that were most in tune with their characters and the performances that were required from them to fit the overall arc of the story. I just wish that the movie, I think, had more of an emotional anchor. I think you sort of touched briefly on that with Jenna Ortega and Paul Rudd's dynamic. And while it worked, it did work for me. I think the overall sort of reconciliation of it fell a bit flat to me. And I was really hoping for maybe more of like, I think a good, like, emotional anchor, impact, gut punch, whatever have you. I think would have really rounded out the film in a nice way. But I mean, overall, I really enjoyed it. I think the kills were gnarly. I think for the most part, pretty much all of the comedy worked for me. I think it's just a couple story beats here or there that I think could have been improved upon. But as you said, though, this coming out of the gate with a first feature writing and directing, I think this is a strong start. Ari Aster, I believe, was an executive producer on this,
Hmm.
so I think there was a great team behind it.
No, I agree, and I'll go off a couple things that you said as well. In that, the unicorns, for example, the CGI on them, I think you are right. There are a couple of CGI instances where they didn't look that great. There's one in the very last shot of the movie where the compositing was really off, and that was the only one that really bugged me. But it was weird because when you see like the big CGI creature, you kind of ask yourself, like, okay, do I hold the CGI to an A24 standard? Or since it's more of a bigger budget than normally, do I hold it to like a mid budget sized movie standard? Like, I almost had like a thought to myself of like, how harshly should I be judging the CG right now? Like that's kind of what I thought to myself,
Mhm.
which is just a bit funny. But I agree with you in that all the comedy pretty much worked for me, and I find it interesting in other reviews I've read for the film. They're saying a lot of people saying that the comedy falls flat. Could not disagree more. Like I thought the comedy was the best part of the movie.
The,
Like
the
it worked
the deliveries
emphatically.
from everyone were so on point. Again, speaking to Tia Leoni and Will Poulter specifically,
Hmm.
their delivery and their comedic timing specifically, I thought was near flawless.
Yes, yes, and Anthony Carrigan also does a great job of being like the straight man, which usually for him he's the one who's zany. So seeing him kind of take on that straight man persona was an interesting new comedy dynamic from him that I enjoyed.
Hmm.
And again, the performances were great overall. I really liked the chemistry between Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega. Like I really felt the slight estrangement, but also desire to want to be connected there from the two of them. There's the opening scene does a really creative thing with not only setting like a comedic tone, but also setting what the relationship dynamic is for these characters. And I won't give away what it is, but they're on an airplane, and then something occurs where Paul Rudd desperately tries not to move, and that moment alone kind of set the table for like, oh, this is where their relationship is, and it really did a good job of doing that. Um,
And you want to root for Paul Rudd just because he's Paul Rudd, and you're like, hey,
exactly.
stop being mean to Paul Rudd.
Yeah, yeah, but at the
Um,
same time, I will say though,
yeah.
the Paul Rudd character kept pissing me off in the movie because of the choices he was making. But they did a great job contextualizing at the end of the movie why he was making those choices. But like, you can tell that Jenna Ortega's character just kept being underestimated. And just as you're watching the movie, you're just like, for the love of God, it's kind of like when you watch, I'm going to get very niche here, but it's kind of like when you watch an episode of Doctor Who and nobody's listening to the doctor and you're just like, Jesus Christ, just do what they say. Like I
Mhm.
got to that point, like with Jenna Ortega's character, I was like, someone listen to her. Someone please listen to her.
Well, yeah, she was the one trying to constantly be the voice of reason, as
Yeah.
was, a lot of the time Anthony Carrigan's character, but he was just the help and she was the
Hmm.
art major daughter of the employee,
Right. Hmm.
so which I think fit perfectly for the movie, but you do exert a lot of the frustrations on it. There's something in the movie involving an art piece, and I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure that a good chunk of it is fake.
Hmm.
And I think that that was a hysterical way of like, this movie is based off of this painting.
Hmm.
And then they're like, oh, but like they've uncovered through technology that these pieces, this whole background is further missing. There's more to the painting than
Yeah.
meets the eye. And then that's just the rest of the movie.
It was so
I,
good.
I'm pretty sure
Uh,
it's fake, which I think is just a hysterical concept
yeah.
for a basis for a movie. Like, imagine if like they were like, ah, yes, here is Starry Night, but we recently uncovered that there was actually a cave just off screen,
Yeah.
and that's the beast that's going to terrorize this town.
Yeah. Yeah. And that painting, by the way, it was a great recurring bit throughout the movie when they would
Mhm.
kind of go back to the mural. It was very funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, but guys, that's kind of our review on Death of a Unicorn. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I typically prefer to give grade scores over star scores, but I probably give it an A minus 3.5 stars. Where were you thinking?
Yeah, I'm about 3.5 too. My enjoyment overweighed the gripes that I think would bring it down to a 3.
I agree.
But
I agree.
yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, once you see Death of a Unicorn, what did you think about it? I'd love to see your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next review.